Fear Zone Channel, your channel of haunted stories. Good evening, everyone, and now, let's go to today's story, which is from Mr. Antonio, and this happened to him in the city of São Carlos, which is in Brazil, and at that time, which was in the year 2000, Mr. Antonio was 24 years old. And today, I will talk about the day that I spent a frightening night, because I had to do something fast against a werewolf, because this creature could cause a tragedy in my village. And it all starts like this. I live in an ordinary neighborhood on the outskirts of my city, and near my house, there was a small farm of a friend of mine, who was called Jonas, where I always picked some fruit on this site. The fact is, I spent a few weeks without passing the site of Jonas, because I started working until the night. But one day, I went to my friend's farm and got several bags of fruit, and told Jonas to leave the bag of fruit in a hidden corner near the fence, so that when I got back from work at night, I could go there and get the bag of fruit without bothering him. The hours went by at work, and when my shift ended around 10 o'clock at night, I went to a bus stop to get a bus, but that day there was a delay of almost 40 minutes, but as soon as the bus arrived, I took it and went near the neighborhood, where I got off near Sitio do Jonas, and started walking on a dirt road, when some time passed and I arrived at my friend's farm. But when I was already picking up my fruit bags at the farm's fence, I was startled by the animal I saw in my friend's backyard. I kept looking at it, because this animal was hiding behind a piece of wooden fence, and it did this so that the farm dogs would not see it, and this, to me, already showed the intelligence of this beast. At this time, I wanted to leave that place, just because I was afraid of this beast, because it was bigger than a dog, and its appearance was bizarre, because this animal seemed to be a monkey mixed with a dog, and for sure was a dangerous beast. At this time, I was a little far away from this animal, and stayed hidden watching it. I was prepared to run away from that place, but to my surprise, the beast went under the window of Jonas' house that was open, and at that moment, something unbelievable happened, because the creature got up, and stood up, like a man, balancing on two legs, that being for sure was a werewolf, and he had already put his head through the window, and was looking into the house. I was desperate at that time, and I had to do something fast, because the beast, for sure would get into the house, and 'cause a huge tragedy, because my friend Jonas had a wife and two small children living with him in that house. Well, I looked to my side, and there was a tree nearby, so I took some rocks in my hand, and threw them at the roof of the farmhouse, and the werewolf noisily took his head out of the window, and kept looking for where the noise had come from. Even so, the werewolf was still near the window in the house, and it seemed that he would try to get in through the window again, and to make matters worse, the dogs from the farmhouse were not around at that time. I even think that they were sleeping on the other side of the farmhouse. Anyway, and I had to get that creature out of there as fast as possible, but luckily for me, I saw a piece of aluminum plate in the barnyard, and I stoned this aluminum plate, and it made a big noise, and the dogs came to see what was happening, and the creature was kind of lost, and not knowing what was happening with the noise that I made. At that time, I saw the creature getting on four legs, and running away from the dogs, and it came running towards the fence, and with that, I climbed the tree quickly, so that the werewolf didn't see me, and I stayed there on top of the logs hiding, and just looking at the place and also in the woods, but the creature had disappeared, and I only saw the dogs near the fence barking towards the dark woods. But now, it was complicated, because I didn't know if the werewolf was around or not, and also, it was very difficult to find anything in the dark woods, especially with the dark color of the beast. But what happened is that I saw my friend Jonas in the backyard of the farm, holding a shotgun in his hands, and Jonas' dogs came to the fence, near the tree where he was hiding. I thought it was strange that those animals did that, and the dogs started barking, but before long I heard 2 shots from the shotgun. Then I heard a noise of something running fast into the woods, but I couldn't see if it was the werewolf or not. But at that time, I shouted to my friend not to shoot, while he loaded his gun, and he said, "Who was in the branches of the tree?" And I said it was me. I quickly got down from the tree and went to the fence of the farm, and then I started talking to my friend about what happened. I told him that a werewolf was in the farm, and that it tried to get into his house. Anyway, Jonas told me thank you for having risked for his family, but he said that he only saw more or less this creature, and it was quite large to be a dog, and that this animal was scary because their eyes seemed to be lit, but he had not seen this beast standing. But that day, I ended up sleeping at my friend's house, and I would not risk going away on foot through the dirt roads with that werewolf around, so I ended up spending the night at my friend's place. However, we were scared, and sometimes I even looked out the window, but fortunately the creature did not return. But as soon as dawn broke, I grabbed my fruit bag and left for my house, and at this time, there were already several people walking along the nearby dirt roads. But while I was walking along a dirt road, I saw a trail of blood on the ground, and there was an old man who sold bread on the street. He was riding his bicycle, and I started talking to this old man, and he told me that the blood on the ground was from a strange man who passed by in the morning on the road, and this wounded man was covering with his hands his ears that was bleeding a lot. But the old man saw the stranger entering the forest and disappeared. Well, I was wondering about this guy, and I kept thinking about this guy, because for me that blood on the road had some connection with the werewolf. But a few days later, I went back to the house of Jonas, who had shot the werewolf, and I told the story of the wounded man on the road who had his ear hurt. Jonas told me that he thinks that one of the shots from his rifle caught the werewolf's ear, because when he shot the creature that was behind the tree, only his ear appeared behind the trunk. And Jonas also told me that near the tree there was some blood on the ground when he passed near his fence in the morning. And of course, I already connected the clues about the wounded guy, that the old man said he saw him bleeding on the road, and for sure, this stranger had something to do with this werewolf. But other than that, I went out in the streets of my neighborhood to try to find some guy with the wounded ear, but I found no one. But for sure, the man who turned into this werewolf would not go easy and show up with a hurt ear, because someone would suspect. Well, I did not find the guy suspicious, and the werewolf too. Never seen anyone talk about this beast in the village, but that I spent the most trouble with this creature, I did. And you, what do you think? That the guy with the injured ear was the werewolf, because he appeared in the morning, the same dawn that the werewolf was shot in the ear, and that was my horror story that I spent with the werewolf. Before we go to the next story, subscribe to the Fear Zone channel, and leave your like and comment on the video to help the channel grow. Canal Fear Zone, your channel of haunted stories. Hello everyone, and this story happened to Mr. Caesar from the city of Cruz Alta, which is in Brazil. That was in the year 1992, when Mr. Caesar was 48 years old. And today I will tell a haunted story in which I saw a werewolf bringing terror to some residents of my neighborhood, and then I managed to discover this mystery. Well, to start the story, at that time, I was working on a farm as a caretaker, where I lived with my family, and my job there was to do everything. I watched over the place and did small repairs in the corrals and fences, and also took care of the farm animals, which normal things of the countryman, and in this region there were several farms too, for sure a good place to live. One night, I was doing a quick round the farm to see if everything was okay, and while I was walking through the pasture, I saw several chicken feathers on the ground. I got scared about this and went to my house and got my hunting rifle and went back to the pasture to investigate what was going on. I went to look at the chicken coop and saw that something got in there and killed several chickens, but what amazed me is that something got in over the top of the coop and tore the roofs off and managed to get into the coop. However, I thought it might be a man that did this, because if it was an animal, he would be trapped in the chicken coop, because he wouldn't be able to get out. I walked hidden through the pasture of the farm, and about 50 meters ahead, I saw an animal inside my farm, and I saw that this animal was very big. I stayed hidden near the fence to see what it was. Although I couldn't identify what kind of animal it was, I saw that its fur was dark. From the looks of it, to me, it was this animal that killed my chickens, so I walked towards this creature to get closer so I could shoot it and put an end to this animal. But at this time, something happened that I didn't expect, for the creature suddenly stood upright, as if it were a man, and I lay down on the ground quickly to hide, and I was very frightened, for this beast was a werewolf. I saw that this creature kept sniffing the air and looking around trying to find me. It seemed to suspect something was wrong, and this werewolf got back on all fours and ran to the fence and ran away, and I took advantage and ran back to my house. I stayed at my window watching the farm, and I was worried and afraid and thinking about the cleverness of this werewolf, because this beast entered the farm and destroyed my chicken coop without making a sound, and my dogs did not even notice this creature inside the property. Well, time went by and the werewolf did not appear, but around 4 o'clock in the morning, I saw a strange man passing near my farm, and he was wearing some clothes very fast, and he seemed very scared, but soon he disappeared into the woods. However, next, I saw 2 men passing near my farm, and they were 2 Kaipira friends of mine, and they seemed to be hunting something, or was after something, but I saw that the 2 were armed. I took advantage, and went to my backyard to talk to them. It was Mr. Jose and his son, and they said that they thought that some invading animal attacked their farm, but they saw a naked man who stole their clothesline, and therefore they were hunting this man. I told these friends that I saw this suspect passing near my farm, but I also told them about this creature that entered my farm, and that the next day we would solve the maniac's problem. Then the day dawned and I went to talk to Mr. Jose, and after some information from some locals, we found out where the suspect who was naked in the woods worked. One night, Mr. Jose and I stayed hidden in the woods and chased the suspect, and it was the same man who I saw wearing the clothes at dawn, and to our surprise the maniac disappeared into the dark woods, but we found his clothes lying on the ground along the trail. We walked through the woods, but we couldn't find the maniac, and we returned to our homes. But the next day, Mr. Jose and I agreed to go to the farm where the suspect worked, and when we got there, we managed to find the man we were looking for. My neighbor wanted to know why he was in the woods at night, but the suspect said that he had mental problems, and that sometimes he would get disturbed and disappear, and when he returned to normal, he was somewhere isolated. My neighbor didn't even want to know, and said that if he saw him in his yard again, he would shoot him with his gun. After that we left, but otherwise, the point for me is that this guy could be the werewolf that entered the farm where I lived. Anyway, my neighbor and I thought about following this suspicious man during the nights, but soon we learned that this guy had left our neighborhood. And for me, that guy who walked around naked and unclothed was the werewolf, and this is my experience that I had with this creature. Well, and before we go to the other story, subscribe to the channel and leave your like to receive more videos of scary stories.